Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Great to see so many of you logging on this morning. Dorothy here from the CCMA, and you're all very welcome to this week's webinar, which has had a huge level of interest, and we very much thank everybody that has participated in our member survey. So as normal, we're going to give a few minutes for people to just join in, and on screen this morning you will see myself, Niamh from WSI, and Shane O'Gorman from Coyne Research. Thanks, Niamh. So Shane was involved in undertaking the survey on our behalf, and Coyne Research we've worked with Coyne Research now for the last, I think, 3 or 4 surveys. So it's been great to have this survey completed and to have such valuable benchmarking data available to all of us, which hopefully you will find of interest. Just to let you know, a copy of the survey will be available on our Insights page just after this call. So do feel free to go ahead and download it. And I'm just going to give everybody a couple of seconds. If you want to just give me a hands up, heads up, thumbs up to let me know that you can hear okay, that'd be great. And as always, if you have any questions, feel free to let us know and just put them in the chat box there to the right. That'd be great. Thanks for that.
Seems everyone can hear us.
Hi, how are you? And I see Joe there as well, so great to see so many people there. Brilliant. Great, so we've a lot of material to go through. I think we've 40 odd slides, and I think the initial few, which are sort of the overview ones, I'll just go through quite quickly. But just to put in context this survey, so as many of you will know, every year we undertake a benchmarking survey looking at things like attrition and absenteeism, and in previous years salary levels. And obviously when it came to this year and being in the middle of COVID, we felt that we would look specifically at some of the aspects of COVID and what it means for the association and for membership and the challenges people are experiencing. So a large part of the research is looking at that. So the initial part of it is very much our standard benchmarking data, which hopefully you will find valuable in terms of putting in context the industry and where we're at. And then as we go further into the survey results, we very much look at, what companies are doing, how they've restructured, and what the plans are for the next 6 months and into the current, the next year. And also then looking at the challenges. And from a CCMA perspective, obviously our goal is to make sure that we're supporting members, and some of the challenges, highlight things like support required in terms of, sharing best practice, learning from each other and supports, and that's something we'll be very much focused on in the coming months. So as a first step, I think one of the big requirements from members was benchmarking data. So delighted to be able to share this with you today. So I'm trying to go to the next page, and for some reason it's not. Oh, there we go. So just as I said, a quick overview of what I'm going to be going through, and Shane is going to pitch in as needs be as we go along. So the first section of the research was very much just putting in context who the companies were that participated in the survey, and we had 55 companies, which was actually up from our previous survey, so we were delighted with that. Second section looks at a profile of the staff working in our customer service operations. Section 3 looks at working from home during COVID-19 and what companies have put in place and what percentages are working from home. Section 4 looks at reopening the contact centres and the challenges that people are currently experiencing. And Section 5 looks at future initiatives and the challenges that people see into the future. So as I say, we'll go through each section. So just to put in context, so as you see there, we've conducted similar research over the last number of years. There's been some gaps in some years, and the most recent was last May when we launched actually our previous survey at our annual conference. And it's very much a survey where we ask members to participate. They nominate somebody in their office. So I know some of the people on the call have probably been the people who've been involved in completing the survey, and thanks again for doing that. And it's very much to give us insights at a point in time and where the industry is at. So we're conscious that this piece of research took place from the 4th to the 19th of June. And we know in terms of COVID, there's been little spikes and resurgences in other countries. So, some of the questions around that may have been different if we were doing the survey today. So we do ask you to keep that in mind. And I think we highlight that when we come to that particular slide. But as you'll see there in the bottom right-hand corner, we issued the survey to 71 companies who nominated people and 55 replied. Now, some of them came back to say, some of the people who didn't reply, they felt some aspects of it weren't directly relevant to them and they couldn't complete it all, and that was absolutely fine. So absolutely delighted to get 55 responses. So quickly, just to go through a profile, and you'll see there to the right, we're showing the profile from previous years and then for this year, 2020, and you'll see the base. It's the highest number of survey responses we've had in all of our surveys to date, which is great. So of the base of 55, 55% were multinationals, 29% were Irish privately owned, 13% were Irish public sector, including semi-state, and 3 were Irish public listed companies. So to be fair, the profile was pretty similar in terms of previous surveys, which is great, and it just means there's consistency in terms of the data that we'll be sharing with you today. We then also asked for a breakdown of the industry sector, and again you'll see the figures there from last year and from this year. So 22% were BPOs, followed by utilities, financial services, insurance, banking, etc. And then others were a mixture of other industry sectors. So by far the biggest was the BPO sector, and I suppose if you put financial services, insurance and banking together, that's quite a big element of the respondents, as well as utilities. So again, we looked at the profile, and this is something we do every time we conduct this survey, where we look at what the profile was and the split is of operations. And just to be clear, I know you'll all say that doesn't add up to 100. Obviously, quite a few member companies have more than one location, and that's reflected in the figures that are there. And as before, you know, the bulk or a large percentage are based in Leinster, and you'll see Dublin by far the largest, but we also have operations in Kilkenny, in Kildare and Louth. Then Munster is 51% of the locations of the respondents, and again Cork would be the biggest, followed by Limerick, Waterford and Kerry. And then as we go into Connacht, Sligo and Galway, and as we go into Ulster, it's Antrim and Donegal. Okay. So in terms of the profile of the staff, and again, you'll see here in the brackets the previous figures from 2019 in terms of the number of respondents, but this looks at the split of roles in any contact centre operation. And as you'd anticipate, the biggest role and the largest percentage are frontline customer service agents, teammates, advisors. I know different companies use different terminologies. So that is 69% versus 68% the previous time we conducted this piece of research, followed by frontline management, middle management, senior management, and then a range of support, IT roles, training, development, and HR. So again, similar profile, similar I suppose spread in terms of the proportion of staff and the different roles, and by far the biggest continues to be frontline customer service advisor staff. And then as always, we look at the split, the gender split, and I think it's always very positive for our industry. The split is pretty evenly spread in terms of male, female. So in frontline staff, which is to the left there, you'll see it's 54% female, 46% male, and the figures for the previous survey was 51-49. So we have a slightly higher proportion of females versus males for frontline. And then for the entire contact centre, which takes in middle and senior management, the split is 53-47 in terms of female to males. They're the figures in brackets, again, to remind you, are the 2019 figures. And then the average age, and we discussed this at I know some of our board members are on this call at our board last week, and we were discussing that, you know, sometimes the perception is the industry is quite a young industry sector, but I think, you know, the positive from me, an elder lemon in the industry, is the average age is 31 years, and actually was the same in the 2019 report, and the average years of length of time of service is 4 years, which again I think is very positive, because again there's sometimes a perception that attrition can be quite high. And if you look, we grouped together the sort of the 24 to 40-year-olds, and that was 91% in terms of the number of staff the respondents were for. And in terms of length of time in service, 83% were 2 to 8 years in the company. So again, I think very, very positive reflections on the industry. So then getting into the nitty gritty, we looked at attrition and absenteeism, and I think you'll all be more than familiar with the definitions for attrition and absenteeism, but this is just to be clear, the definition and the measurement we used for this exercise. So for attrition, the average number of staff that leave an operation over a year expressed as a percentage of the total average complement for that year, and this includes voluntary and involuntary. And for absenteeism, we use the definition number of days lost through authorised and unauthorised leave represented as a percentage of contracted days annually, excluding holidays. So figures have come way down, certainly in terms of the attrition. So again, for advisor level, the average attrition is looking at 15.8%. And again, just to remind you, these are 2019 figures. So we obviously asked people to provide us with the figures for last year. So we've got a full year set of figures. And when we're comparing with the 2019 report, were obviously 2018 figures. So you'll see attrition has come down, and interestingly, you know, we're a good percent, you know, we're quote the UK industry attrition figures that we were able to access, and they were 21%. So we're significantly below it in Ireland at just under 16%, or just under 16%. Attrition lower in middle and senior management at 4.1%, and that saw a big drop from last year's study, where at that point in time it was at 11.9%. And then we asked, did companies envisage that attrition would reduce post-COVID-19? And I think we'd all pretty much expect this response, that with all of the uncertainty around this, and certainly an anticipation and expectation that attrition will drop. 73% of the companies who responded envisaged that attrition would drop post-COVID. So we just looked a little bit more at attrition. I won't go into all the detail of this slide. I know it's quite a busy slide, but we're just looking at how the variations have come across in the years. And again, you'll see that we're quoting the actual year that the attrition figures were for. So this survey, as I said, is showing the 2019 attrition figures. So half of member companies say that their attrition has stayed the same in 2019 versus 2018. And both grown and contracted attrition rates versus previous years have also decreased. So I think the general view is that attrition has come down, and obviously the view is it will absolutely continue to come down. Absenteeism again is staying pretty steady in our sector. Average annual attrition rate is 5%. Again, pretty much the same as the previous study. So, you know, that's reasonably consistent. And I know from speaking to member companies, that's sort of a benchmark that a lot of companies would have, but they would not like their attrition to be over 5%. And that seems to be the general industry level that it's at currently, which I think is positive. So then we asked about recruitment, because we know this is a challenging period, and in some sectors it's a very, you know, frightening period in terms of volumes of activities and, you know, travel, tourism, etc., being significantly hit by COVID. So we've asked, you know, members what their plans were in terms of recruitment for 2020. So as you'll see there, 36% envisage that their levels will stay the same, while 40% expect to see an increase and expect to recruit in 2020, which is positive. Now, again, you'll see there that's a significant drop from 87% in 2019. But we would caution that this is a relatively low base size that these responses are from. So we're still looking at a positive of 40% recruiting and 36% staying the same. And obviously, we appreciate some industries are experiencing challenging times, and there may be some reductions. So I suppose to get into the meat in terms of COVID, we asked about where companies felt we were at in terms of the pandemic, and we said, do you feel the worst of COVID-19 in Ireland is past? And as you'd see, 56% of the companies, so 31 companies, felt it was behind us, the worst of it. 9% felt it was happening now, and 16% felt it was ahead of us. And again, I just put in context that this research was taken between the 4th and the 19th of June, and I know it's a bit of a roller coaster for everybody, so I know things you know have changed even more since then. But I suppose there was a general perception that people felt, you know, more than 50% felt the worst was behind us. So we looked then at the percentage of staff that worked from home, and we looked at prior to COVID-19 and obviously since COVID-19. As you'd expect, there's been a huge turnaround. I think the word the industry has been using a lot has been pivot. So a lot of companies have had to pivot and have done so very successfully. So you'll see there, prior to COVID-19, the average was 20%, and now in June 2020, the average is 85%. And within that, almost half of the companies who applied have 100% of their staff working from home. So we know that for sure. Many companies have still, their contact centres are still closed. Some have vital staff that need to be there in terms of IT staff, operations staff, but again, at very low levels. But, you know, in the main, we've seen 85% as the average percentage of staff that are now currently working from home, which is a significant change, obviously. So we then drilled in a little bit more, because I think we were interested to find out what the impact potentially might be for customer service operations on different aspects of the operation. So we looked at things like reduced, you know, service levels and opening hours. And again, the base on this was very small, like we're talking about 8 companies here. So you'll see there at the bottom, 6 companies envisage permanent changes to their service levels, while 5 envisage changes to their opening hours. And and 85% of companies do not envisage permanent changes. And again, I think what we saw was certainly in the first week or two when companies were trying to put technology in place, you know, organize laptops for people, you know, organize access to systems. There was certainly for sure a dip in customer service, and some companies, as you'll see there, are even planning to reduce their opening hours. But in the main, companies turned around very quickly and managed to support. Now, they may have opened, you know, reduced the voice channel and opened up other channels such as messaging. But again, we've seen, you know, once companies got everything in place, certainly for the first week or two, there were challenges, but a lot of companies feel they are back up to the service levels that they would have been at before. And split of versus on-site, off-site, from working from home. So we're looking at, what we're asking is how companies see, you know, the working from home changing. So, you know, what are the plans in terms of bringing people back into contact centres? So as you'll see there on the left-hand side, in the next 6 months, again, people are saying nearly 60%, 59% will continue working from home, and 41% will be on site. And then we asked them to look into 2021, and a slight variation, 43% working from home and 57% working on site. So, I mean, very much, and I think we all know this from our own organisations, the view is that people will continue working from home in the short, medium to long term going into next year. And it's, you know, based on the companies who took part in this survey, we're looking at 43% potentially next year working from home, and 57% continuing to are working on site. And then we asked a little bit about the structures being put in place for working from home going forward, because again, we certainly know that a lot of companies are trying to see what is the best structure to put in place. I know a lot of surveys are being undertaken currently where companies are asking staff, you know, what their preferences are, whether they can come back to the office, you know, obviously if there's underlying health conditions, or if there's a family member that has underlying health conditions, it may not be an option to come back into the office. So a lot of companies are looking at these, and these are just to sort of give you a flavour of some of the options that people are looking at, or companies are looking at. So set days, specify which days in the office, 53%, you know, say yes, that's something that they're considering putting in place, 33% are undecided. 42% are looking at full-time working from home, and again 31% undecided. And the other options are things like set number of days per week, revolving presence, and again that's I suppose a model where people would come in, one team or one bubble, I think as a lot of companies are now calling it, would come in 1 week and work from home the following week, and then obviously come in every second week. Minimum number of days in the office, 2 days, 3 days, again just looking at that. So as I say, 53% envisage set days, 42% envisage full-time working from home, and 38% number of set days per week. And the other mentions were just, you know, other options that we hadn't thought about. And you'll see there companies are looking at, you know, 9% of the companies that were involved in this, you know, certain percentage of employees returning to the office, some staff in the office, some working from home permanently, some flexi time, and rostering, which is what I was just mentioning there, 1 week in the office, 1 to 2 weeks working from home. Again, interestingly, and I know there's been a lot of comment and discussion, and even in some of our own Ask the Expert sessions, we've talked about the impact on productivity. And from the companies, the 55 companies that took part in this, and just to say, I don't know, I'm not sure if I skipped over the slide, these represented just under 24,000 full-time equivalent staff for these 55 companies. So it is a very big chunk of the number of staff working in our contact centres. 42% said that productivity had increased, and 29% had said productivity had decreased. So I suppose there's a net effect there. But as you can see, quite a significant number of companies are seeing, and I certainly view that their productivity has increased in the working from home model. It's a very specific question here. Have you had to update your business assurance processes or risks to account for working from home? And 71% said yes. And then we asked about reopening contact centres. So what policies do you plan to put in place for reopening? And again, we put a couple of options there based on our understanding of what people were currently looking at, and some of the protocols that obviously need to be put in place as per HSE guidelines. So request working from home when employees feel sick with cough, temperature. Obviously, 91% have said yes. Mandatory health and safety training to include COVID-19 protocols for all employees before they return to the office. 87% yes, they'd be putting that in place. Providing PPE in order to protect yourself and your staff. 56%. And certainly from talking to some members that have staff back in the office, they are obviously clearly keeping the 2 metre social distancing, and in some case they do not necessarily obviously require the PPE, but 56% of companies have indicated that they will provide it where required. Office equipment provided an amount to subsidise the cost of the new setup work from home, and again 55% of the companies involved said yes, that's something. And you'll see other queries in terms of, you know, closing the contact centre, disciplining staff for not following the guidelines, temperature checks. A lower percentage, 25%, are looking at that or already have it in place. Again, we drilled down specifically into multilingual because this was an area that people had discussed with us. So again, this is a relatively small sample or percentage of the sample. So 23 of the companies, of the 55 companies, do provide multilingual support. And a number of companies have indicated that a number of their multilingual employees, when COVID began, asked if they could work from their home country. So you can see there 26% are facilitating that. And then of that number, which is just 6 companies, have they specified a maximum time limit, because there are certainly revenue implications of people working outside. As you can see there, there's tax implications if employees work from their home country for longer than 6 months, and half of the 6 have said that. And I think that's just an interesting insight for companies who are providing multilingual support. So top challenges of managing remotely versus in-house. Biggest one, and this is from obviously the companies, their views, the biggest one was staff engagement. And you have to pick your top 3. And as you can see, in terms of the 55 companies, 67 of the indicated that staff engagement was their top challenges, you know, as in they picked it as either 1, 2 or 3. Obviously followed very closely, if not the exact same, obviously, as the quality of broadband connectivity. And that certainly seems to be an issue for some member companies in terms of staff not being able to, you know, support and access applications that they need to provide customer service support. So that is quite a big challenge. And then data security. Things like workforce planning, technology, allocating calls to staff, monitoring performance, meeting service levels, staff productivity, recording calls, quality control are some of the other the challenges, but for sure the top 2 are staff engagement and quality of broadband connectivity. And then we asked the company what their view would be of what the staff would consider to be the challenges that they're finding working from home. And again, interestingly, the top challenge was the lack of engagement with co-workers. And we know certainly, just even from our Ask the Expert series, that a lot of companies are investing heavily in, you know, forums, events, communication, that they are keeping all of their teams engaged, that they're still having an element of fun, which you would normally obviously have in any contact centre, and they really are focused on ensuring that staff are engaged and are, you know, communicating and are working together as a team in as much as they can, although they're physically distanced. Childcare at 67% obviously is a big challenge now, conscious that since the survey was conducted, a lot of childcare, but not all facilities have reopened, but certainly it is a challenge for those who are trying to work from home and do not have the childcare facilities reopened and available to them. And lack of dedicated office space was the third challenge expressed by staff. Broadband, stress, concerns over job security, management support, financial worries, and access to affordable housing were the other challenges that were expressed there. I'm keeping an eye on the time, so I think I have another 6 minutes. So just as a reminder, any questions at all, please feel free to put them in the question box. And then we asked about the top technology challenges of working from home. And again, broadband, quality of broadband connectivity was the first one and the biggest challenge, with 85% of the companies putting that in the top 3, followed by data security, followed by the cost of technology solution. And certainly we know in the early days when companies were pivoting and trying to set people up working from home, a lot of companies had challenges getting access to laptops. Obviously laptops are quite expensive, so we definitely think that's part of that technology solution and the challenges that were there. But for sure, broadband is the top challenge from a technology point of view. And then we asked about the top challenges currently, and as you would expect, COVID-19 was ranked as the biggest challenge by 84%, followed by the demand for flexible, smarter working options, and then followed by the need to invest in new technologies. And again, the fourth one there, for obviously certain industry sectors, there's been a loss of customers, a loss of business, and the challenges that that represents. And some of these challenges then would look at things like salaries, attrition, impact of AI, Brexit. When we did the survey this time last year, I think Brexit was certainly much higher up the list. I know it's gone down a bit in everybody's agenda, but some of these, I suppose, challenges were ones that we carried over from the survey that we had last year. And then looking at future initiatives. So we asked again what the top areas of focus for the customer service operation was for the next 6 months. And this was like a spontaneous verbatim response. So this was where people told us what they were. It wasn't that we provided a checklist. And the big one was achieve, maintain high quality service levels and customer satisfaction. And that was 45% of the companies who responded. That was their top area of focus, followed closely by increased staff engagement, productivity and support, and then followed by automation of customer service and implementation of new technologies and training systems. So I think it's very positive that the focus is very much on maintaining the excellent customer service levels that all of the organisations provide and will continue to provide, while at the same time ensuring that they're supporting and engaging with the team members and the staff that are obviously delivering that excellent customer service support. And that is the key area of focus for the companies, the 55 companies who took part in the survey for the coming months, for the next 6 months. Split it up slightly, what do you expect to see more of, less of in the next 6 month period, or 12 months period, sorry. And as you'd expect, you know, more of hybrid working models, and that sort of is well reflected in the stats we showed you in terms of current levels of working from home and planned levels of working from home in the future. Automation, more technology to increase the level of service provide, greater focus on cost, which absolutely and for sure is happening, and increased employee engagement and increased staff retention. So we certainly envisage that companies are going to be testing and trialing new hybrid working models and very much engaging with staff in putting those models in place. In terms of what they see less of, less attrition, less calls and interaction for some companies, less staff numbers, less returning to the office, less new business. And there are some of the things that they envisage seeing less of. And then I think this is actually my last one, apart from the summary slides. We asked very much what you would like, services as members you would like from the CCMA, and obviously benchmarking data was the biggest by far, and followed by industry research, which hopefully today is a valuable input into that. Workshops on key industry topics, which absolutely we've taken on board, and we've already put in place a diversity and inclusion working group, which started work a couple of weeks ago. Best practice guidelines, webinars, training, and going further on to our awards and our member events. So that's something as a board that we will be focused on and working on in the coming months to make sure we deliver on those services that members have requested. So just to go through a very quick summary of the research. In terms of the profile, broadly similar to previous studies, with over half of the sample multinational. The split then in sectors in terms of BPO, utilities, financial services, and then the split, just a summary there of the split between the different regions. In terms of the profile of staff, as I said in going through it, and I won't go through all those bullet points because of time, you know, the profile was very similar, which is reassuring in terms of the stats, in terms of you know, the gender mix, the age, the tenure, attrition is coming down, and obviously in terms of absenteeism as well. And then working from home, as we said, prior to COVID, it was an average of 20%. Now it's 85%, which but at the same time, over half of the companies who replied with 100% working from home. And the split going into next year looks like, and what people are indicating at this stage, is 57% back on site, 43% working from home. And positively, there's been an increase in the productivity in some cases. We then looked at the opening of the challenges, the reopening the contact centres, and again, without going through all the points again, looking at the challenges, the focus for companies is very much on encouraging and continuing to provide excellent customer service while engaging their teams. And in terms of future initiatives, the key focus is on maintaining those service levels, increasing staff engagement, and looking at automation and digitisation. And that is the end of the presentation. So I'm conscious, I don't know if there's any questions, and I'm conscious of time. And just very much to say, the copy of the webinar and of the research will now be available for members to access. So please feel free to download that. It's there today for you to access. But I think if there's no questions, I will finish off. Thank you so much, everybody, for your attention and your participation. Great to see so many people on the call. And if you have any follow-up questions after that you would like to come back to me on, please do. Happy to answer them. And as I say, a full copy of the survey is available. So thank you. Thanks, Shane. Thanks, Aisling. And we'll see you all soon. We'll have another webinar next week, and hopefully some of you can join us. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.